Hi everyone, it's Bernard here on behalf of movieGameNostalgia.com, and today I'm going to go back into my old memory banks and go back to 1969, and I'm going to talk about, hey, I'm in the UK, but this series, this American thing had a big bearing on myself and a lot of kids in the UK at the time. I mean, 1969, this thing, Star Trek, which you all know in America, and obviously you know now in the UK, has become a massive global franchise with different spin-offs. But the original was something special for certainly for me and for a lot of my friends who obviously remember it airing on the BBC. And if you think about it, actually all the episodes are actually shown in America before we actually got to see episode 1 here in the UK. And I'm not sure what order we did them in. The BBC actually censored some and actually banned some early some of the episodes as well. So we didn't get to see them all. But to think that the Americans had actually seen all the episodes, I think there's a total of 80. I'm not sure how many episodes first aired in the US, but obviously to think they saw all theirs before we even saw one. But what an amazing time for us to start watching Star Trek. I mean, BBC, if I remember rightly, I mean, I've tried to check back and can't verify this, but I think it was on a Monday evening at 8 o'clock on BBC Two. And in the UK at the time, we only had 3 channels. You had BBC One, BBC Two, and ITV. That was it, just 3 channels in 1969. And I think it aired on a Monday night, which obviously is a school night, school the next day. But obviously it aired at 8 till about 8:50. I think it was 50 minutes. There's no adverts on the BBC, so it's straight through, no messing about. So obviously you saw the little breaks, obviously, for the US space thing, obviously, when we watched it as kids. But what a time. I mean, this was July 1969. This was when the Americans landed a man on the moon, which, again, was just as inspiring to us over in the UK, and I'm sure around most of the world, as it was in the US. I mean, I'd celebrated my 10th birthday on the 6th of July. My football team was probably the best team in England. I mean, we just won the First Division title in 68. We just won the FA Cup in 1969. These were amazing times. We qualified for the Cup Winners' Cup, which we went on to win the year after in 1970, when Star Trek was absolutely obviously reaching its peak on the BBC. I think it aired, the first lot aired till 1971, December 1971. So that time for me was amazing. I just, it's the time I finished junior school in the UK and just started high school. It was also a sad time for me. I actually lost my father in that period as well. But for a young lad, late 60s, 69, 70, 70, what an amazing time. I mean, it was amazing. And I used to go on a Saturday morning to watch, I've always loved movies. My father used to take me to the big budget things. My mother used to take me to the Disney stuff, the cartoon. My dad used to take me to the live action stuff. So I had a bit of an old head on my shoulders as well. So there's a lot of this original Star Trek that would probably fly over other people, young lads' heads. But I enjoyed it. I liked the verbal as well. I wasn't just for the action and the story. I liked a good story and even the love elements. I had my first crush when I was about 10, at school on a girl. So all those things appeal to me. I mean, things are raging, obviously, in 1969. It's a long time ago. I can remember certain things, obviously, 50 years ago. It's over 50 years, isn't it? Anyway, but Star Trek was something really special. So I thought I'd have a look at Star Trek, and rather than just do a basic top 10 of, obviously, the top-rated Star Trek, the original series Star Trek, the three seasons we had, didn't we, about 80 episodes, I thought I'd just put in like my top 5 for each of the series. And obviously, some of those will be top-rated, but not all. I think of the 15 I'm going to go through here, season 1, 2, and 3. I think there's just 4 that didn't feature. And I've tried to think back as well. I'm not trying to, obviously I've seen these things time and time again. I mean, I watched them a couple of years ago all the way through from episode 1 again. So there's things that obviously have been tainted, if you like. And I have probably, but I've tried to put my young head on and remember, just looked at the basics plot line of each episode. And then in my mind, it's like, yes, I did. That sticks in my mind from being a kid. This is what inspired me. So they're not necessarily the most rated films, but from each season, are my 5 if you like favourite things, it's hard to put them, rate something number one and number two. But I've done that on that basis. But obviously, there's so many. I mean, of the 80 episodes, there's very, even the rubbishy ones I enjoyed. As a kid, I loved it. It was something you look forward to watching. And even though you knew it was bedtime after you watched, it's time for bed after you'd watched it, it was still absolutely superb. It's a big part of my life. That's why I wanted to do it. So yeah, so I've gone through this, and where they have rated in the top 10, I will actually mention it as I'm going through the different ones. So I'll just have a quick thing on it. See what you think. I mean, if you agree with these, just a bit of so you and you can have a judgment as well on what you think of my rated episodes. So I'm going to start with Series 1. I mean, obviously, most people think Series 1 was the best, but if you look at the top 10 rated episodes that most people, if you look at the videos on YouTube and the top 10s, if you look on the various sites, and obviously I've looked at an Internet Movie Database, most of the top 10 actually came from Season 2 as opposed to Season 1, so that's quite unusual. But if we look at number 1, I mean, Series 1, I'm going to go in number 5. I mean, I'm going to say number 5. And this was actually number 3, rated number 3 in the top 10 of all time Star Trek original series. I put it as my number 5 Series 1, was The Balance of Terror, which was the Enterprise must decide its response when a Romulan ship makes destructively hostile armed probe of Federation territory. So, I mean, this had everything in it. I mean, it started off with a wedding, and then it turned off. We get to see the Romulans. I think what appealed to me, obviously, I obviously knew the obvious links between Rome and these Romulans, the look of them, etc. But obviously, you also got the bigotry, didn't you, in that episode of there was is it Mr. Styles, who wasn't one of the regulars. Obviously, he was a bit bigoted towards Spock, obviously, because he obviously they are back in time. Obviously, the Romulans and the Vulcans that come from the same gene, don't they? Same gene pool. So there was a lot of bigotry towards Spock as well in it. But I think what appealed to me about it, what was the Romulans, actually seeing things from a Romulan's point of view on their bridge with the guy, I think he was to play Sarek, wasn't he, in future episodes? Going to play Spock's father, but he was obviously the Romulan commander. And it was nice to see the action on the Romulan ship and a little bit of the Romulan ship as well. And that stood out in my mind. And obviously when you look back on it now and you see the scenes with obviously there's one guy unfortunately dies, and he's the one who was getting married at the start, whose wedding got interrupted, and you see a touching scene with Captain Kirk and his obviously his fiancée that he didn't quite marry, obviously, and that was a touching scene. And obviously you see obviously is it Yeoman Janice Rand, who obviously shares a moment with Captain Kirk as well. So there's lots of things in that episode, and those things sort of stick out to me. I mean, nothing more so than the Romulan thing. And as I said, it interested me to look at the Romulan side. At number 4, I've put Shore Leave. I mean, this was fun, wasn't it? Shore Leave. The past 3 months has left the crew of the Enterprise exhausted and in desperate need of a break. But does this explain McCoy's encounter with a human-sized white rabbit, or Kirk crossing paths with a prankster who plagued his early days at Starfleet Academy? And I think this stood out in my mind as well because of the Alice in Wonderland connotations. First of all, I just like the way the thing started. It was just so weird, but so silly. But there was a darkness to it as well, wasn't there? There was the fact of, did we actually lose Dr. McCoy at one stage? Actually, we thought he'd been killed, which obviously is shocking for us. Obviously, they're the main characters, and as a kid, you don't perhaps think these guys will come back alive, or you think, well, what's going on here? How's it? This can't be true, and all this sort of thing. But yeah, I mean, it is. And if you look now at that episode, it was like a Westworld, wasn't it? It was a fun planet. So if you look at the Westworld movies and obviously now the TV series, I mean, that really did appeal to me, and that sticks in my mind of the fantasy element being into Disney films as well, which I was, and obviously the Alice in Wonderland connotation. So that was my number 4 anyway. At number 3, Tomorrow is Yesterday. The Enterprise is thrown back in time to 60s Earth. And that, again, because it was the time, wasn't it? It was the 60s, it was everything. There's the US Air Force, it was the jets, it was the UFOs, it was, and that just meant so much to me. it just stood out as a. I think the scene where you saw the Enterprise and the jets buzzing the air, in the sky. I mean that really sparked my imagination, and obviously the little bit of time travel. I love. There will be a theme through a lot of these of my favourites where there's a time travel element. I am into time. I love time travel. I love all types of film genre, but obviously the thought of time travel does appeal to me, and as is a things I always look forward to, movies or anything on the old, every Star Trek, even the Next Generations and Discoveries and all this time warp thing and slingshot around the sun to go back in time and forward in time. I mean, it's always appealed to me. So Tomorrow Is Yesterday really does stand out as one of the top ones. At number 2, I put City on the Edge of Forever. This is actually number 1 in the all-time ratings on Star Trek. When a temporarily insane Dr. McCoy accidentally changes history and destroys his time, Kirk and Spock must follow him back to prevent the disaster. But the price for this is high. And obviously we had the wonderful Joan Collins in this, didn't we? And again, it's basically time travel. It's holodeck sort of stuff, isn't it? If you think about the new Star Treks, with all the trouble they had with the holodecks, going back into the gangster times and all this sort of thing. And this was obviously the 30s. This was obviously the Depression time. And obviously concentrating on a lady called Edith Keeler, who was to obviously her death was needed to actually make sure things happened. And obviously the fact that Germany it was involved about the war in Germany, and the fact that the Germans could have developed a nuclear bomb, and that wiped out everything. It was so much going on in such a thing, and it just appealed. The buzz of it just appealed to me totally. And obviously the ending, the poignant ending with where obviously McCoy tries to save Edith Keeler, but obviously Kirk knows, even though he's in love with the girl, obviously the wonderful Joan Collins, he stops him from saving her. So, but absolutely great episode. It doesn't surprise me that's number 1 of all the Star Trek original series. Although it's only my number 2 for the first season. My number 1, and the one that sticks in my mind, was of course Arena. For bringing hostility into their solar system, a superior alien race brings Captain Kirk in mortal combat against a reptilian captain of an alien ship he was pursuing. So Arena for me was absolutely superb. I mean, you look at the Gorn monster, so much power, so much strength. How was Kirk gonna better him? And obviously in the end, even though Kirk does have a violent side, he does his humanity of not being able to kill the guy. And of all the episodes in season 1, I've not said that's my favorite episode of everything, but that's one that sticks out in my mind, and I put that as my number 1 of the first season. That's Arena. All right, on to season 2. At number 5, I've got The Ultimate Computer. Kirk and sub-skeleton crew are ordered to test out an advanced artificially intelligent control system, the M5 multitronic system, which could potentially render them all redundant. Yeah, so it was a sort of thing of obviously a lot of these things I know now are obviously a play on what's happening in the United States at the time, people being put out of the work and mechanization, stuff like this. But as kids, when you're watching these things, I just remember the effect of a big robot doing things, and you don't need humans and all this sort of thing. It's very Metropolis. I was into that sort of. It was the time. Obviously, we didn't have computers then. All our computers are big, massive things, and obviously to think that a robot could do things that humans could do was absolutely amazing. And obviously had the jeopardy of it being a war game, being a serious thing, and actually Kirk's ship was destroying its own compatriots. I mean, that does stand out in my mind, and obviously it's certainly the element of Big Brother and the machine taking over really stuck in my mind. That's my number 5 anyway, The Ultimate Computer. At number 4, I put a piece of the action. I mean, this is the crew of the Enterprise struggles to cope with a planet of primitive people who have modelled their society on 1920s gangsters. Yeah, I mean, absolutely silly. Well, again, film I love, gangster film, Jimmy Cagney. I would watch Jimmy Cagney films, just love the sort of thing. And to see Kirk and the guys putting on the silly accents, saying the silly things, and you could just see that the cast had fun with it, and that just stick in my mind. And again, as I say, it's not one of the top rated ones on Star Trek, but it's just something that stood out to me. And the fact of him driving a car, I mean, that was so funny, and he kangarooing along because he couldn't really get the car right. At 10, I couldn't drive a car either, so I would probably laughed and just thought, yeah, that's probably how I'd do the thing. But yeah, I mean, a piece of action was a bit of fun. As I said, it tapped into my love of gangster films as well, and Jimmy Cagney, etc. at the time. At number 3, Journey to Babel, which is actually number 8. This is number 8 in the top 10 rated Star Treks. The Enterprise holds a number of quarrelling diplomats, including Spock's father, but someone on board has murdered his mind. So yeah, we get to see Spock's mum and dad, and I always remember with Spock, I wanted to see more of his human side, and obviously we did see it in the films, didn't we? But I always never understand why because he was half and half, how his Vulcan side totally dominated his human side. But obviously we got to see bits and pieces in that with his it's nice to see his mum and dad, obviously. And there's a murder mystery thrown in, which is another one of my things. I love murder mysteries. I used to read a lot of Agatha Christie when I was quite young. So obviously there was a murder to solve, and obviously Spock's dad was the chief suspect. So I think that appealed to me because of that murder mystery. It wasn't really going into great detail, was it? There wasn't a lot of detective work going on, but I think that really appealed to me. And my number 2 from series 2 is actually number 2 in the top ratings as well. So this is Mirror Mirror. Transport accident places Captain Kirk's landing party in an alternate universe where the Enterprise is in the service of a barbarically brutal empire. So there you go. So you go from wanting to see a bit of Spock's human side to seeing a bit of an evil Spock, obviously, but an evil Spock with still a little bit of normal, not niceness, is it? A little bit of logical thing about brutality. So it was Spock, but he was a clever guy, but he wasn't perhaps as evil as he could have been. And it's quite funny how the evil ones were quite soon locked up on the other ship, obviously. But to see this mirror image, it's like a time swap thing, isn't it? And going back and alternate universe, which again appeals to me. I love things like the Twilight Zone. There's obviously things in like that. So things like the Twilight Zone appeal to me. So this sort of mirror stood out for me as a 10-year-old and 10 or 11-year-old. Then when this obviously first aired, I really did enjoy that, and obviously I wanted to see more, and we saw similar things in more Star Treks. But that was my number 2 anyway, and obviously it was a number 2 of all the top rated ones as well. But my number 1 from season 2, not the greatest story, obviously, but Trouble with Tribbles. I mean, it was number 4 in the top rated, so it is well liked, obviously. To protect the space station with a vital grain shipment, Kirk must deal with Federation bureaucrats, a Klingon battle cruiser, and a peddler who sells furry, purring, hungry little creatures as pets. So yeah, so you had the trouble. You had the trouble on the space station with the Klingons and the fights, and Scotty getting into bother, even though he's supposed to be the grown up and not cause trouble. But it was quite good. You had Klingon spies. You had everything, didn't you? But obviously, in it all, you had the wonderful Tribbles, who I actually purred like a Tribble when obviously in one of the later Star Trek franchises was the Next Generation. They actually made a reappearance, which is absolutely fantastic. But of season 2, obviously, the Trouble with Tribbles, obviously, as a 10, 11-year-old, was the one that stuck in my mind. So that's series 2. And series 3, which say most people thought was probably the worst. There's actually only one episode in series 3 made the top 10 in the Star Trek top 10, but a bit of that again in a minute. First of all, I'll go run through my top 5. At number 5, I've got the Mark of Gideon. Kirk beams down to planet Gideon, appears to find himself trapped on a deserted Enterprise. Spock on the real Enterprise uses diplomatic skills to deal with the uncooperative inhabitants of Gideon and find the captain. I I'll look at this now and it's really, really silly, but what I really enjoyed as a kid was the fact he initially transported to an empty ship, and the thoughts of what's happened here, what's going on, where has everybody gone, and how can he run a ship on his own, and all those thoughts, obviously. And very quickly he was joined by a pretty blonde girl, wasn't he? So again, my young man of obviously Kirk had a few girlfriends over time, didn't he? But obviously there's that element with it. And I think now, obviously, I think back was, there's no room for anyone on this planet, but they built a full-size Enterprise. But hey, as a kid, I suppose that didn't really come to mind. But it is a silly episode. But I think what it appeals to me was the empty Enterprise. Just stood out for me. It's just something I remember, and always, even though I go back and watch the episode now, and it's probably one of my least favourites now, it did stick in my mind as a kid. Number 4, The Savage Curtain. Kirk, Spock, Abraham Lincoln, Vulcan legend Surak are pitted in battle against notorious villains from history for the purpose of helping a conscious rock creature's understanding of a concept he does not understand, good versus evil. So again, the facts of seeing people from history. I mean, I obviously knew Abraham Lincoln. Some of the other people that they've shown from history. Obviously, you've got Genghis Khan was in there as well, wasn't he? Which another probably one of my favourite films. Was it John Wayne in Genghis Khan? So I think elements where they're my favourite films as well, where these characters actually were in Star Trek, was amazing. It was like a time travel thing, even though they were put on this rock. And let's face it, I mean, I was here in the UK, we had Doctor Who, so that rock monster looked absolutely funny now to look at it. But when you consider what we had to put up with Doctor Who, I mean, to us it probably looked quite scary and looked quite real to us as kids anyway. So that molten rock monster. But yeah, what does amaze me is just the fact of good versus evil. Some of the fight scenes are rubbish, obviously. Some of the, it's attacking each other with spears and stuff, but it was just the element again of the Abraham Lincoln and Genghis Khan element that really appealed to me. Number 3, again, one of my favourite things was Western movies. So we've got Spectre of the Gun. As punishment for ignoring their warning and trespassing on their planet, the Melkot condemned Captain Kirk and his landing party to the losing side of a surreal recreation of the 1881 historic gunfight at the Old Corral. Yeah, I mean, and that to me, just basically because of the Western element to it, I would have seen the films about the OK Corral and the Doc Holliday and all this sort of thing, but that obviously appealed to me, and it probably appeals to me more now because of the sets as well, where the sort of sets were half done, probably to save money at the time, but obviously it made it look even more sinister and awesome, didn't it? And also, again, we do have someone getting killed. We do get Chekhov killed as well, which is a bit of a shock. We don't expect the main characters to get shot, but obviously it all turns out well in the end, doesn't it? But that did appeal to me, the gunfight and the cowboys and the 6 shooters as opposed to lasers. So that was my number 3 anyway. The Spectre of the Gun. Number 2, I got All Our Yesterday. So again, this theme of time travel, etc. When Kirk, Spock, and McCoy investigate disappearance of a doomed planet's population, they find themselves trapped in different periods of the world's past. So yeah, even though there wasn't much element, was there? But it just sticks in my mind that again, it was a time portal that they went through. So obviously, I remember that, and Kirk was sword fighting in one stage with these with swords, which was again my sort of film, obviously with the old Prisoner of Zenda sort of thing and all that sort of films, and the Errol Flynn films, which I used to love. So you had Kirk sword fighting. You had obviously Spock reverting to his old Vulcan of thousands of years in the past, his old temper, and falling out with McCoy, which even though they used to pick on each other, they never really fell out, but in this episode you did, and it just really stuck in my mind, obviously being thrown in time. And again, it's a time travel element that appealed to me, even though again the story isn't fantastic, but to see McCoy and Spock, 2 of my favourites, obviously with Kirk at each other's throats, was quite unusual. And there's a pretty girl thrown in as well, so I'm always a bit gullible for a pretty girl. And my number 1 of season 3 is actually number 9. This is the only one that made the top 10 of the Star Trek ratings, top 10 rating episodes. And it's the Enterprise incident. An apparently insane Captain Kirk has the Enterprise deliberately enter the Romulan neutral zone, where the ship is immediately captured by enemies. So yeah, it was the fact of Kirk being a totally different personality, seemingly silly and taking him into danger. But obviously quite soon we know that it's all a plan, isn't it? But again, it's the Romulan element and the fact they had a woman commander. Obviously, we were used to Uhura, obviously on Star Trek, but they had Romulan commander in charge. Obviously, another love element for Spock there, obviously, which was quite unusual in those days. But it was quite good because, say, the Romulans, like the others, like the Klingons, were always my favourites. I love seeing those, and even though none of the Klingons really, apart from the space station, had on a war footing with the Enterprise or anything like that. Obviously, the Romulans were. So it was good to see that and actually see a woman commander, and obviously see how we thought Kirk was being, wasn't being himself, was he? Kurt was cracking up, but it wasn't. It was all a plan, and it all turned out well in the end. But say what stood out for me was the actual fact that Kurt was supposed to be insane, and the fact that obviously he ended up having to do sort of battle with the Romulans and nick a cloaking device, wasn't it? He had to nick a cloaking device off them, which was another piece of equipment that we thought, oh, great, and we used to think, these people like the Romulans and the Klingons have how's the Enterprise, how's the Federation going to cope? We don't have this sort of thing, can we get it? So that was quite interesting. So anyway, that was my number one. We enjoyed that. I mean, the top 10, if I run down the top 10 top rated Star Treks, so obviously number 10 was Devil in the Dark, which we haven't talked about, was sort of the mining colony with the mysterious people, obviously with the alien creatures. Obviously turned out they were only trying to survive, and obviously they were being mined, etc. So that's why they were killing people, because they were angry. Number 9, we've already mentioned, was the Enterprise incident, which was my number 1 of Series 3. Number 8 was Journey to Babel, which was my number 3 on season 2. At number 7 was Amock Time, which I've not talked about, where Spock goes. That's the number 7 in the top ratings of Star Trek, where Spock returns to Vulcan to meet his wife. It's not something that stood in my mind, as I say, even though I found that episode quite dry at the time, I think. But that's number 7 anyway in the top 10. At number 6, another one we've not touched upon, the Doomsday Machine, of a giant robotic spaceship that could destroy planets. Obviously, a distraught commander they come across a distraught commander who's obviously out for revenge on it. That's number 6. At number 5, which is the last one I didn't feature in the top 10, Space Seed, a genetically engineered conqueror. So we're talking again sort of Attila the Hun sort of thing, aren't we? 20th century, with other 20th century evil people. They find them obviously on a ship, obviously been frozen or whatever in time. But that was number 5. At number 4 was The Trouble with Tribbles. At number 4. At number 3 was The Balance of Terror, which we've talked about. At number 2 was The Mirror, fantastic. And at number 1, obviously, was City on the Edge of Forever, which, when you look through the different websites, was a lot of people's most popular one as well. So that was all between July the 12th, 1969, December the 15th, 1971 in the UK. So we did catch up eventually, but I'm glad I shared those with you. I hope you enjoyed that little memory. Let me know what yours are in the comments below, what you think of my top 5 for each season, if you agree or you don't. As I say, I've tried, if I did it now, some of those wouldn't be on, if I went through and did a top 5 for each season. But they're the ones, as I said, that stuck in my mind from being a kid at a very special time for me. I can't deny it. The late 60s, early 70s, very sad time, special time. But hey, I had Star Trek, didn't I? I had Star Trek on a Monday night at 8 o'clock. Absolutely fantastic. Thanks for watching anyway. Whatever you do with the rest of the day, have a good one. Follow me on Twitter at nostalgia_movie. I'm on Facebook at Bird and Evil, links to movie game nostalgia.com for my DVDs, board games, and posters. And I'm on YouTube, Burns in YouTube. So I also have movie reviews, board game reviews, and little specials, movie quizzes, etc. And also, if you're into football, my wonderful Manchester City football team, who were wonderful in those times, 69, 70, 71 great years for City as well, Manchester City. So what a time to be a kid. But hope you enjoyed that. What are you going to do this day? Enjoy yourself, look after yourself, look after your friends, and more importantly, look after your family. And I'll see you all again. Thanks for watching.